The box was already open when Claire realized her hands were shaking. She hadn't meant to find it. She wasn't snooping, wasn't suspicious, wasn't the kind of woman who went through her husband's things. She was just cleaning the basement after a water leak had soaked through the back wall. Moving boxes, stacking things, living the ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday of a woman who believed, truly believed, that she was loved. But there it was, hidden behind a panel of loose insulation. A dark green metal box with a combination lock, the kind people use for documents or valuables. And for a reason she could never fully explain, Claire's fingers knew the combination before her mind did. Their anniversary. 4 digits. The lock clicked open. Inside were 47 letters, all of them written in her husband Daniel's handwriting. All of them addressed to the same woman, a woman named Mara. And the date on the very first letter was not before they were married. It was not from some old, forgotten relationship he never threw away. The date on that first letter was the morning after their first wedding anniversary. Claire sat on the cold basement floor for a long time. She did not cry. She did not call Daniel. She did not call her best friend Joanne. She just sat there in the dust and the silence, holding 47 letters that were about to tear her world completely apart. And then, in ways she never imagined, put her back together again. This is the story of what happened next. To understand how Claire got to that basement floor, you have to understand what her life looked like from the outside. And from the outside, it looked perfect. And she and Daniel had been married for 15 years. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. They had a daughter named Lily, 12 years old and obsessed with astronomy. Daniel was a project manager at a logistics company. Reliable, well-dressed, the kind of man who always remembered birthdays and held doors open and made other women tell Claire, at dinner parties, how lucky she was. And she felt lucky. That was the thing. That was the part that would haunt her later. She had spent 15 years feeling lucky to be loved by a man who was, it turned out, loving someone else the entire time. Or at least trying to. The first night after finding the box, Claire read every letter. She sat at the kitchen table after Daniel went to sleep, the letters spread before her in chronological order, a glass of wine untouched at her elbow. She read them the way you read something you desperately hope will have an innocent explanation. Slowly, hunting for the moment where it all makes sense. And for the first few letters, she almost found it. They were beautiful, in a devastating way. Daniel wrote about missing Mara, about the shape of a specific afternoon they'd spent together years ago, about a song that reminded him of her laugh. It read like grief, like a man who had lost someone and hadn't fully let go. Claire told herself, this is just a man who never processed his feelings. This doesn't mean he doesn't love me. People carry old loves. This doesn't have to mean anything. Then she found the letter dated the night Lily was born. She remembered that night with absolute clarity. 12 hours of labor. Daniel holding her hand so tightly she thought her fingers would break. And the moment the nurses placed Lily on her chest and Daniel sobbed, actually sobbed, and said, "You're the most incredible person I've ever known." And then he had gone to get coffee. She remembered that. He was gone for almost 40 minutes, and she had assumed he was calling his parents. But now, reading the letter, she understood exactly where he had gone and what he had done. He had found a quiet corner of that hospital, taken out paper and a pen he apparently carried with him for exactly this purpose. And he had written to Mara. He described the birth of his daughter to another woman, while his wife lay exhausted in a delivery room 20 feet away. "I keep thinking," the letter read, "that if things had been different, this would have been ours. Some part of me will always wish it were you." Claire closed her eyes. She pressed her hands flat on the table. She breathed slowly, the way her therapist had taught her years ago during a difficult period she rarely talked about anymore. In for 4. Hold for 4, out for 4. Then she picked up the next letter, and the next, and the next. By 3 in the morning, Claire had moved past grief and arrived somewhere colder, somewhere more dangerous, because the letters she was beginning to understand were not just love letters. Something about them was changing the further she read. The language was shifting. Slowly at first, a word here, a phrase there, but unmistakably. In the early letters, Daniel wrote like a man pining, tender, mournful, romantic in a melancholy way. But as the years progressed, the tone began to curdle. By year 5 of her marriage, year 5 of these letters, he was writing things that made her skin go cold. I know you've been seeing someone new. I made sure that won't last long. You can keep trying to move on, Mara, but you know how this ends. You always come back, because I always make sure there's nowhere else to go. I saw you at the farmer's market on Saturday. You looked tired. You should rest. Stop fighting this. He had been watching her for years, systematically dismantling any attempt she made to build a life without him. And the chilling part, the part that made Claire get up from the table and pace the kitchen in the dark, was how calm the letters sounded. Not unhinged, not raging, calm, patient, like a man who had complete confidence in the outcome, like a man who had done this before. Claire stopped walking. She stood very still in the middle of her own kitchen at 3 in the morning, and a thought arrived that she immediately tried to push away, and couldn't. She typed Mara's full name into her phone. She didn't know the last name, but Daniel had mentioned the city she lived in, just 2 towns over, in one of the earlier letters. She searched, and within 60 seconds, she found what she was looking for. A local news article, 6 months old. The headline read, "Woman 38, reported missing. Family pleads for information." Her name was Mara Ellison. And the last letter in that box, the 47th letter written in Daniel's familiar, careful handwriting, was dated the day before she disappeared. If this story is already getting under your skin, you are not alone. And hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this ends. Trust us, you need to see where this goes. The next morning, Claire made Daniel's coffee the same way she always did. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, stirred, not shaken because he hated the foam. She set it in front of him while he scrolled through his phone at the breakfast table. She kissed the top of his head. She asked about his day. She did all of this while, inside, she was a completely different person than the woman he had sat across from yesterday. She needed time. She needed to think. And more than anything, she needed to be careful. Because she had read enough of those letters to know that Daniel did not respond well to people who got in his way. That afternoon, while he was at work and Lily was at school, Claire photographed every letter, all 47. She uploaded them to a cloud account Daniel didn't know existed, an old email she'd made years ago and never used. She then sat down with the letters spread across the dining table and did something methodical, something she surprised herself by doing, because Claire was a high school English teacher, not an investigator. But she was also a woman who had spent 15 years in a house with a man she clearly had not fully known. And she was angry now. She was past sad. She was furious and focused. She made a timeline. She cross-referenced Daniel's business trips. Trips she had helped him pack for, trips she had waved him off on, trips she had spent alone with Lily, against the dates and references in the letters. The alignment was almost perfect. But every time Mara appeared to have made progress, a new job in a new city, a new relationship, a move, Daniel had been there, in that city, on a work trip. He had followed her, over and over, for years, quietly, methodically destroying any foundation she tried to build. And then Claire found something else. Something she had glossed over the night before because she was too consumed by the letters. At the bottom of the green metal box beneath the last letter was a small photograph. Old, slightly faded at the corners. It was a photo of Claire. Not a recent photo. This looked like it was taken years ago, before she and Daniel met. She was younger, laughing at something off camera, standing outside a coffee shop she used to go to in her 20s. She had never given Daniel this photo. She had never seen this photo before in her life, which meant he had found it, or taken it, before they ever officially met. Her legs went out from under her. She sat on the floor right there in the dining room, photo in hand, and for the first time since finding the box, she cried. Not from heartbreak, from fear. Because she suddenly understood something that rearranged everything she thought she knew about her own life. She hadn't been a replacement for Mara. She had been selected, chosen, deliberately. Because she looked like Mara. Because she was the right type, the right temperament, the right level of trusting. Daniel had not stumbled into loving her. He had engineered it. He had found her, researched her, and then arranged to meet her in a way that felt completely accidental. Their entire love story was a construction. She called Joanne first. My Joanne was her best friend of 20 years, the person she called after her mother died, the person who had done her makeup on her wedding day. She needed someone in her corner who knew Daniel. Joanne, I need to talk to you, something serious, about Daniel. There was a pause on the line. Then Joanne said something that stopped Claire's heart cold. Claire, has he been acting differently lately? Because I have to tell you something too. Something I've been sitting on for a while. Tell me, Claire said. 3 weeks ago, Joanne said slowly, Daniel called me, out of nowhere. He said he was worried about you. He said you'd been saying things that didn't make sense, forgetting conversations, getting paranoid about small things. He asked me to let him know if I noticed it too. He said he was thinking of reaching out to your doctor. Claire's blood turned to ice. He's building a story, she said. Her voice was very quiet. He's building a story about me before I can build one about him. Claire, what is happening? I need you to listen to me very carefully, Claire said. And I need you to believe me, because I'm about to tell you something that is going to sound impossible. But I have 47 letters that prove every word of it. She told Joanne everything. It took 40 minutes. Joanne did not interrupt once. When Claire finished, Joanne was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What do you need me to do? I need you to keep acting normal with Daniel. If he calls you, act like everything is fine. Tell him I seem a little stressed, but nothing unusual. And what are you going to do? I'm going to the police. Detective Reyes was not what Claire expected. She was a compact woman in her early 50s with short silver hair and the particular stillness of someone who had heard many terrible things and learned to receive them without flinching. She had been assigned to Mara Ellison's missing persons case from the beginning. And when Claire sat down across from her and slid a folder of photographed letters across the desk, Detective Reyes looked at it the way a firefighter looks at smoke, with recognition. How long have you had these? She asked. 4 days, Claire said. I needed to be sure before I came to you. I needed to photograph everything and make sure copies were somewhere safe. Smart, Reyes said quietly. She was reading as she spoke. Very smart. Detective, Claire said. Is she alive? Mara, is there any indication she's alive? We don't know, Reyes said. The case went cold fast. No body, no evidence of foul play, no witnesses. Just a woman who vanished. She paused. Her sister always insisted she hadn't left voluntarily, that something had been done to her. But we had no leads. You do now, Claire said. Detective Reyes looked up from the letters. She looked at Claire for a long moment. This woman sitting straight-backed in a plastic chair, pale and terrified and absolutely composed, and said simply, Yes, we do. Claire made one mistake. She knows that now. She has replayed it 1,000 times in the months since, and every time she wishes she could reach back and stop herself. But she was human. She was frightened, and she was furious, and she had been sitting on the truth for 4 days while her husband sat across from her at dinner and told her about his day. She confronted him. It was a Wednesday night. Lily was at a sleepover. The house was quiet. Daniel was reading in the living room, and Claire walked in, sat down across from him and said, "I found the box, Daniel." He looked up from his book, and the thing that terrified her most, more than anything that followed, was that he didn't look surprised. He closed the book. He set it carefully on the arm of the chair. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It had an expression that was not quite anger and not quite amusement, something colder than both. "Which box?" he said. "The one in the basement," Claire said. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that later. "The green one, with the letters." A long silence. Then Daniel leaned back, crossed his legs, said in a perfectly conversational tone, "Claire, sweetheart, I think we need to talk about how much stress you've been under lately." "Don't," she said. "I'm serious. Joanne called me this afternoon, actually. She's worried. She said you called her with some kind of story about... Stop. About letters, which, honestly, I don't know what you think you found, but... I photographed them," Claire said. "All 47. They're already with someone you will never be able to get to. And I went to the police 4 days ago, Daniel. Aunt Detective Reyes says hello?" The mask came off. It didn't happen dramatically. No shouting, no overturned furniture. It was just a very subtle shift in his face, like a light going out behind his eyes. And suddenly she was looking at someone she had never met before. Someone she had lived with for 15 years without ever actually meeting. "You made a mistake," he said. His voice was very quiet. "No," Claire said, standing up. "You did, 15 years ago." She walked out of the room. She walked upstairs. She locked the bedroom door and called Detective Reyes as they had arranged. 20 minutes later, a patrol car was parked outside her house. The next morning, she discovered that her car's brake fluid line had been partially severed. The mechanic who inspected it said that if she had driven any distance at highway speed, the brakes would have failed completely. She had been planning to drive Lily home from the sleepover that morning. The warrant was executed 6 days later. Daniel's work computer, his personal devices, his car's GPS records, his credit card statements going back a decade, all of it was taken. What investigators found over the following weeks was a picture so detailed, so meticulously constructed, that one detective later described Daniel as operating with the patience of someone who considers himself completely untouchable. His GPS records placed him in Mara's neighborhood the day before she disappeared, and the day of. His phone had pinged off a cell tower 3 blocks from her apartment at the time she was last seen by neighbors. But the thing that broke the case open, the thing that finally gave investigators the thread they needed, was a reference in one of the letters to a property. A place Daniel described in careful, almost loving detail, writing to Mara about a cabin he had access to through a childhood friend deep in the woods, 3 hours from the city. A place, he wrote, where they could finally have the time and quiet that they had always deserved. They found Mara Ellison at that cabin, 17 days after Claire walked into Detective Reyes's office. She was alive, dehydrated, malnourished, deeply traumatized, but alive. She had been kept there against her will for 6 months while Daniel drove out twice a week, telling Claire he was going to help a friend renovate a property. Claire remembered those weekends. She had been grateful for the quiet. The day the news broke, Claire was sitting in her kitchen when her phone rang. It was Detective Reyes. "She's out," Reyes said. "She's at the hospital. She's going to be okay." Claire put the phone down on the table and sat completely still for a moment. Then she put her face in her hands and cried. Really cried, for the first time since this whole thing began. Not from grief, not from fear, but from relief so overwhelming it had no other place to go. Lily came into the kitchen and found her mother there, crying at the table, and put both arms around her from behind the way children do when they're not sure what's wrong but know that presence is the point. "Mom," Lily said quietly, "are you okay?" "Yes," Claire said, and meant it for the first time in months. "I think I actually am." Daniel was charged with unlawful imprisonment, my stalking, criminal harassment, and tampering with a vehicle. The trial lasted 11 days. Claire testified for 4 hours. She did not look at her husband once during her testimony. She looked at the jury, and she told them everything. The box, the letters, the photograph of herself taken before they ever met, the break line, all of it. In a calm and steady voice that the courtroom reporter later told a colleague she would never forget for the rest of her life. He was convicted on all counts. Mara Ellison attended the sentencing. She and Claire did not know each other, had never met, had lived parallel lives without realizing they were caught in the same current. They sat in the same courtroom and listened to the same judge hand down the same sentence. And when it was over, in the hallway outside, Mara stopped in front of Claire. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did Claire. There was nothing to say that wasn't already understood between them. Then Mara said, "He told me once that nobody would ever believe me, that I was too quiet, too alone, too easy to discredit. He said the only person who could ever stop him was someone he'd made sure the world would trust." She looked at Claire for a long moment. He never counted on that person being you. There are things Claire knows now that she wishes she had known sooner. She knows that control rarely arrives loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, disguised as devotion, as protectiveness, as love so focused it starts to feel like a wall you didn't notice being built around you. She knows that the things she explained away, the location sharing, the way he would show up unexpectedly, as the subtle comments that made her second-guess her own perceptions, were not quirks of a loving husband. They were tactics. She knows she was not stupid. She was human, and she knows the difference now. She also knows this. She found that box because a pipe burst and flooded a basement wall. An ordinary thing. A Tuesday. And she followed a hunch and opened a lock and sat with something that terrified her instead of putting it back and walking away. Mara Ellison is alive because of a Tuesday. Because a woman chose to keep reading when every part of her wanted to stop. Because 47 letters, hidden for 15 years, finally found the wrong reader. And the man who wrote them, the man who was so certain of his own invisibility, had made only one real mistake in all those years of careful, patient manipulation. He had underestimated her. If this story moved you, shook you, or made you think, please subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment below. At what point in this story did you first suspect something was truly wrong? And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like Claire's matter. We'll see you in the next one.